Hello, my name is George Jurgen, and I'm delighted to welcome you today to my talk on Seneca, on his Meditations on Death. Now, we've already looked at one of his other works, which is on the shortness of life. But today I want to talk about Meditations on Death. Why death? Because this is a subject that culturally we're very uncomfortable with. But at the same time, I believe that if we don't look at death, we can't look at life properly. One leads to the other. One is integrated into the other. And Seneca's viewpoint is essentially that if we don't contemplate death, we can't contemplate life properly because they're so interconnected. So with that said, I want to kick off with our talk on Seneca's Meditations on Death. The paradox is, of course, that when we consider death, it's like, the darkness at night. It's darkest before the dawn. So in a sense, that's kind of the connection between light and dark and life and death. And so bear with me here. It's going to be a real eye-opener for you, I'm hoping. So let me share screen and go to our slides and play. There we go. Meditations on Death. The book was originally, I think, called Meditare Mortem. So, why talk about death? Well, since COVID has put death at the forefront of our minds, it's probably a good place to kick off. It's also a good place to kick off because a lot of people are going through massive changes in their lives. They're contemplating change. This pandemic has given them the time to sit back and think about what their life is about, what they want to do. And so this is why it's so appropriate to talk about this today. And secondly, of course, that the fear of death is exacerbated by the fear of dying alone. And in retirement, a lot of people die alone. And that's generally a fear. It's actually not a particularly nice place to be either. But that said, when you have people around you when you're dying, there's a lot of love. When you're dying alone, there doesn't seem to be, although there is, but there doesn't seem to be, and that's what hurts most. And lastly, what do I know about death? And that's where I want to tell you a little story for those of you who don't know. In 2007, I was diagnosed with bone tumor and given 6 months to live. And for 3 weeks, while the oncologist and doctors were doing tests on me, I actually believed this was it. My time was up. Fortunately, my death sentence was commuted to 6 months recuperation after an operation, which you can see here is on my pelvis. There was a bone tumor the size of an eggplant sitting on my pelvis, and I've been having problems for about 1.5 years prior to this. But every time I went to the specialist, they wouldn't take an MRI above my pelvis. They only took it below and they couldn't see it. Anyway, long story short, I had the operation. I'm well now, and I've been living on bonus time. So I did have a rendezvous with death, which I think qualifies me to talk a little bit about this. I hope you agree with me. Right. Now, who was Seneca? I've talked about this before, but for those of you who haven't seen the other video and are coming in fresh, let me tell you, he was born in 4 BC and died 65 AD. He was a stoic philosopher, a statesman, and a dramatist. And he lived in a very difficult time between 3 Roman emperors who were all slightly demented. Nero was one of them, Claudius was another. And because he was an advisor, and he was an advisor to Claudius, he was a teacher to Nero, each day it was a drama and a trauma to go through each day without being sentenced to death or something by these demented emperors. So you can see where his philosophy comes from. Now, what others have said about Seneca is this. Dante Alighieri, who wrote the Divine Comedy, and probably one of the top literary figures in Europe, said that Seneca was placed alongside Cicero among the great spirits in the Divine Comedy. And that's how much Seneca was revered by the intelligentsia and the literate people in those days. So Seneca has a place in our sort of thinking. And Harpham writes in his book, Gratitude and the History of Ideas, that Seneca has been noted as the first great Western thinker on the complex nature and role of gratitude in human relationships, which some of you know I'm a big fan of. So let's go quickly into the prologue of his book, How to Die. I mean, yeah, it sounds bizarre to us, but just bear with this. There's some serious thinking that one has to do here. He talks about the interconnectedness of all things, right? Everything is interconnected. Everything, action has reaction, you know, and it's not just amongst human beings, but with nature around us. So everything is interconnected. And if we don't do things right, there are repercussions, you know, whether it's climate change or whatever. Everything is interconnected. Next, life is a journey towards death. So this idea that we have today that, you know, the minute we're born, we already start to die, right? And in our society and culture, we don't like talking about death. It's not a subject we feel comfortable with. And that's why I believe it makes our lives uncomfortable. Whereas if we had the right concept about death, it would put us in the right framework, mental framework, to live life more fully. And Stoics were taught to seek an inner kingdom, the kingdom of the mind. And the mind here is not just the intellectual mind, it's the emotional mind. And Seneca's thing is to die well is immensely important, so we must rehearse. Why is it important to rehearse one's death? Because if we know death is the ultimate end of our existence here on this planet, then we want to die well. But to die well means that we need to live well. Can you see the connection between life and death? If we're afraid of death, we're afraid of life. So we can't live our lives fully. Therein lies the logic, which is really remarkable. So Seneca, lesson number 1, prepare yourself. Nothing in this cosmos is extinguished. Everything is transformed. You know, just take water. It can go into steam, it can go to ice. It's transformed. It doesn't die per se. Also, as I said, that things are transformed. They appear to die, but they've just really transformed. Whether it's the caterpillar into the butterfly, or whether it's the green leaves on a tree that in the autumn or the fall turn to their original colors. Now, this is an interesting concept. We think that death comes after, whereas death comes before and after. So let's exchange the word death for spirit or energy. Before we became human, we were spirit, we were energy. And when we die, we go back to being energy. So, and to bring in Einstein's concept that energy cannot be created, nor can it be destroyed. It's a really interesting concept, right? Coming from Einstein. Energy cannot be created, nor can it be destroyed, which lends to this thing that, you know, death comes before, death comes after. You know, it's just, we're going through this journey of physicality in time and space. So death is a transformation. And we look at these, what were caterpillars, who are going to now turn into butterflies. It's a transformation. You know, death is suddenly not the ugly word that we humans are so fearful of, irrationally fearful of, right? So Seneca, lesson number 2, have no fear. Death is the undoing of all sorrows, an end beyond which our ills cannot go. As we go through life, we accumulate ills, we accumulate sorrows, you know, betrayals and all sorts of stuff. and illnesses eventually try to devour us. But the point is that death actually liberates us from this too. So we mustn't be so fearful, because there's always a transformation. And in a sense, we are kind of prepared for that in life, because every crisis that we have in our lives, and this is what I teach in my lessons about doing an audit on your life, is that every crisis that we have in our lives is in essence a death. It's a death to our old self and a renewal into our new self. So when you look back into your life and look at the events where you had a crisis, and you'll see there was a death of you, a part of you, which then moved you on to the next stage of your lives. And also the fear of death diminishes the nobility and integrity of all of life. You know, when you watch a movie and you see individuals terrified because of some fearful action, we don't have a great deal of respect for people who are fearful all the time. You know, courage is so much more appealing, you know. And so while we as humans are all fearful about one thing or another, and it's just the human condition, it just seems so much better when we have courage to take action differently. You know, instead of cowering and withdrawing, is, you know, to advance forward and be counted, as it were. And dying fearfully often is itself a cause of death. And that's a very interesting concept, because it reminds me of what Dr. Bruce Lipton talks about, the nocebo effect. You've heard of the placebo effect. Well, there's the nocebo effect. And he relates anecdotally the story of this individual who was told by the doctors that he had cancer and he would die within 6 months. And lo and behold, the man died 6 months later. When they did an autopsy, they discovered he didn't have cancer. He didn't die from cancer, he died of cancer. The idea killed him, not the cancer. I hope I got those words right. Yeah. So Seneca encourages us to study death so you'll never fear it. When you look at something as opposed to avoiding looking at something, it becomes less fearful. Wayne Dyer, the self-help guru, used to say that if you change the way you look at something, what you look at changes, right? If you change the way you look at death, death changes for you. It's all about perception. It's all about our mind. So, lesson number 3, have no regrets. Make sure that each day is an individual life, and so you will be free of worry. I absolutely love this one. And in fact, I live by this. So for example, at the end of the day, I'm in my bed, I'm about to go to sleep. I thank the universe for that day. I'm carrying a lot of worries and concerns, which I then push aside. And the next day when I wake up, it's a new day. Now, whatever problems were yesterday, okay, that was yesterday's problem. Now, they may have carried over to today, but I'm going to look at it in a different light. I'm not going to allow it to overwhelm me. And the reason is because I prioritize that this new day is a new life. I could have died last night in my bed. Whatever problems there were around, that's not my problem anymore, is it? So let's dissociate the problem from who we are. So this new day is a new day, and I'm thankful for this new day, and I'm going to make this a very special day. So whoever I meet, whatever I do, I'm going to be in a good state of mind, because I know this could be the only day I have. And in reality, that is all we have. But we don't see that. We don't see that way. We think we're immortal. And so all the problems and ego get involved and create issues that are not really real. The real reality, as it were, is that we can only live in the present moment. And this is essentially what he's saying. So no matter how much wine passes through your bladder, you're just a wineskin. My interpretation of that is it doesn't matter how much money you make, you can only spend so much. The rest is, you use/abuse, because we only need so much, don't we? And I'm not saying that money isn't good. Money is good. Money is energy. That's not the point I'm making. The point I'm making is, how much do you have to slave to do things to make money and mortgage your present life? Because that's what we've got. And if we're mortgaging our present, we have no future. Because your mindset is always on the future. So you can't live your present. What does it matter how long you dodge the thing you cannot escape? Interpret that to the fact that we're all going to die, we just don't know when. So does it really matter how long we live or how short our life is? Whether we die at the age of 30 or the age of 60 or the age of 90. In terms of infinity, those are nanoseconds in the first place. So it's all about relativity. What is living if it's only a lengthy dying? What he means here is that if you're not enjoying your life, if you're not in a joyful state, if you don't love what you do and what you work at and the people that you're with, then that's, you're not living. So you might as well be dead. It's just a lengthy dying. It's amazing thinking, isn't it? So each day is an individual life. You get up, you see a beautiful sky, the sun rising, and one should be joyful that one is alive, because there was no guarantee that any of us would have woken up today. So put away all those issues and problems about money, about your home, about family, about health, and focus on this day. And if you focus away from the problems take second place. They become less important. They create less stress and anxiety for you. Lesson number 4, set yourself free. Merely to live is not in itself good, but rather to live well. So it's not about existing, it's about living. It's not about dying sooner or later, but about dying well or badly. And you die well if you've lived well, and you die badly if you've lived badly. A good person must live not as long as he wants, but as long as he ought. Here he's talking about serving other people. So, there is, one can will to die if one is not happy. And what he's essentially saying is that, if time is up for you to go and you want to go, that's great. But if other people need you, then you need to stick around. And I think that's a wonderful statement. This is a statement from a man who's, lived his life under the kibosh of 3 mad emperors. And he's known that he could die any day. And yet he's talking about other people, not just about his own survival. And lastly, I love this little thing here. It's a mark of a great soul to turn back towards life for the sake of others. Lesson number 5, become a part of the whole. All things must be born, grow, and perish. None of us are just individuals. We're part of a whole, part of a group, part of, a tribe, of whatever tribe there is. And I don't mean just racially or culturally, but also in business, in communities, and so on. So why worry about what is wholly outside your control? We can't do anything about what's outside our control. And even more so today, post-COVID, where politically people are polarized. There's a strong fight between left and right, between the old regime and the new regime. And this clashes can be quite toxic. And we kind of need to withdraw from that because there's nothing we can do unless, of course, that's part of your work. But if that's not part of your work, then there's nothing you can do about that. And worrying is useless. So focus on what you can do. Make your life joyful by putting aside all your anxiety about keeping it. If we're constantly fearful and want to keep our life, we're not living, we are existing, we are surviving, and that's not living. Across eternity, there's no difference between the longest and the shortest life. Yep, I think I covered that earlier on. So part of the whole, we all work together. We all have our individual attributes and talents, but it's about working in teams and in communities. And no man is an island, no woman is an island. Epilogue. Practice what you preach. Did Seneca practice what he preached? Absolutely. I believe towards the end of his life, and he wasn't a young man, he was ordered to commit suicide. That was the Roman imperial way of ensuring that the emperor didn't have to kill anyone. So they effectively said to the person who was sentenced to death, take your life and you'll spare your family, plus they will get all your assets. If you don't commit suicide, you will be executed and your family will receive nothing. So invariably, most Romans chose the former, to commit suicide in order that their families were not deprived. In Seneca's case, his wife chose to die with him. She did not want to live without him, which I think is rather nice. Well, is it not? It's just wonderful, just a thought. I'm not sure he liked it or that I would either, but do you know what I mean? Just the idea. And in any event, he took a long time to die, and he had to, cut himself and also take poison, and everything was done clumsily. So his death was long and painful, but he did practice what he preached. Right, this is pretty much so. Last words from Seneca. He lives badly who does not know how to die well. So I hope I've got, let me just close this. So I hope I've got the message across that to live well, one must be prepared to die well. So if you have death as your North Star, as well, knowing that is where you're going to end up, you prepare to live well, to live the best life you can, and to take each day as a life of its own. And that way you maximize on your life. And with that said, I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope it's been educational. And please like and share. Many thanks indeed. Thank you. Bye-bye.